Hi, everybody. Welcome to our second episode of our live streams, the Interchain debates, the Knights of the IBC table. And we have four knights with us today. And they're actually not just IBC, they go beyond the IBC. Some of them, I know that some of them do definitely reach out there, which is a cool thing. I'm going to quickly introduce them with no particular order. I really apologize if I introduce somebody before I should introduce somebody, but we have with us Vishal from Stride. We have Vish from Quicksilver. We have Mikhil from Persistence One or Pistake, and we have Val or Valerie from Lido Finance. I hope, guys, I didn't make any mistakes. If I could ask you quickly to introduce each other by let's start maybe with Val, ladies first. Maybe you can introduce yourself quickly, and then we go and by circle.
Hi everyone, great to have you guys. So I'm Val. I lead go-to-market at Lido.
Anyone else, guys? Come on.
Yeah, I can go. I'm Vish. I'm one of the
Yay.
co-founders of Quicksilver. I do product and business development at Quicksilver. Yeah.
Vishal or
Uh,
Mikhil?
I'm Vishal. I'm one of the co-founders of Stride.
Hey everyone, Mikhil here from Beastake. I lead everything Beastake within Persistence.
Thanks, guys. If for anybody whoever you, if you're watching right now the live, or if you're listening to the recording, which is most likely probably, regardless, you probably kind of guessed that those are all people from from staking or liquid staking, and this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to debate liquid staking. We have some questions prepared, or rather topics, which I would like to discuss. There is some questions as well that we had from either your audience or our audience. We kind of couple them together. And I guess the biggest, I don't know if I should really start jumping right in it. You know what? Before I jump into the topics and questions, maybe again, and because you all four of you have slightly different architectures, maybe again starting with Val, maybe you can say what is liquid staking for Lido, and what do you guys understand by liquid staking, and maybe we can do this like again in a small circle. What's for each platform is liquid staking, and then we'll jump into the questions if it's okay.
Sure, I'd love to. Well, Lido is actually not yet live on Cosmos. But Lido is essentially a liquid staking hub, and it started with Ethereum. And the original kind of like thesis behind it was that the barriers to entry to actual participating in proof of stake consensus are very high. So when you think about it, like for example, when it was the case for Ethereum, um, in order to be a node validator, you needed a minimum of 32 Ethereum, which is not necessarily everyone can understand how to operate a node, which again is another kind of like you need technical expertise. And all of like basically all of these requirements, plus the fact that you need to lock up capital. And the locking up capital is actually a huge part of it, because for example, like say that I need to lock up my capital just to earn, for example, like the 3 to 4% of Ethereum staking yield. Meanwhile, like a bunch of DeFi protocols are offering way higher yields. So where like the incentive for stakers is much less, and it's not capital efficient. So essentially that poses a threat to the system, because the system relies on like those node operators and those validators in order to like validate the blocks and then operate and maintain the ledger. So basically what Lido kind of like came up, and other protocols as well, is to say, okay, is there a way that you can basically offer all of the benefits and keep, you know, the pie more decentralized, enable more people to stake, but without kind of like the downsides to it. And so liquid staking basically was the solution to that. So what Lido does, and others here as well, is that essentially it enables any user to like deposit assets. So in the case when it was the time of Ethereum, it's like you deposit your Ethereum into Lido. Lido is just smart contracts that models, like all of us here that have different protocols like use different like liquid staking models, but in the case of Lido, it distributes your stake across different node operators, and then basically the staking rewards go back to the users. And then what's special about liquid staking is that when you deposit assets, you get a liquid staking token in return. And then what that means, it's kind of like a code check. So that's like how I like to think about it. So you get kind of like that token, and it's your redemption mechanism. So you can go back into the protocol, and then with that token, eventually, when withdrawals are possible in the case of Ethereum, you can redeem your stake and then kind of like earn on it. So with token, you can hold it if you want, or you can actually use it in DeFi for like in different DeFi protocols that have integrated it, or also like trade out of it if you. It's a situation in which case like you can trade out of it. So that's how I would explain it. Now the case for liquid staking on Cosmos is actually, I find personally really interesting, because you guys probably know this if you guys are Cosmos aficionados and you guys all stake in your Kepler wallets. You know that the staking rate for Cosmos is super high. So as a user, you think, okay, well, I'm gonna stake on chain on Cosmos and participate in chain security and earn really high APY. But meanwhile, a lot of protocols in DeFi that are developing on Cosmos, they struggle with getting the liquidity because it's kind of hard to compete with like a 20% stake in the Kepler wallet. So it basically stifles the growth of DeFi, the kind of like mechanism that's behind it. And if we want the chain to grow and the ecosystem to grow, well, then we definitely want to incentivize users to not only stake on chain to secure the layer, but also to participate in the apps to motivate developers and all that, for it to be actually useful. So that's when like liquid staking becomes also super interesting on Cosmos, because we say we can enable a user to motivate them to stake, but also use their liquid staking assets to participate, bring that liquidity to the Cosmos ecosystem. So that's kind of the caveat that I would say for Cosmos, why it's really important and why it's really, really relevant like now, and a bit about liquid staking.
Nice, thank you, Val. Mikhil, I'm gonna jump to you. Sorry to put you on the spotlight, but since we have 3 people with the letter V started in their name, I'm gonna jump to you now. I'll try to change the order every now and again. Mikhil, what about you? What is liquid staking for persistence, and what's your goal, guys, in persistence and p-stake with?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we started building liquid staking in 2020, late 2020, and we started with Cosmos. Obviously, back then, the inflation wasn't as high as it is today, and the staking rewards were not that, like, it wasn't 20%, obviously. We were doing a stake drop campaign for XPRT, which is Persistence's native token, and what the stake drop campaign meant was that you could stake some of your assets like Atom or Luna in those days, or other assets like Kawa, and you could earn or you could just get the XPRT token airdrop, which was a different way to just randomly distributing your token. So the idea was to distribute the XPRT token in the hands of people who are aware of staking and understand staking very well, which I think most people in Cosmos do. So when we were doing this campaign, what we realized was there was a huge demand for generating additional yield on your staked assets, because a lot of people, I think at some point, there was more than $1 billion worth of assets participating in these stake drop campaigns across the different chains that we are doing this. And what we realized was that there's a huge demand for generating additional yield on staked assets. And that kind of led us to thinking and doing more research on liquid staking. And we were all aware of Chorus One's effort on the liquid staking front. They were kind of the first ones to actually kickstart that discussion within Cosmos, and we kind of delve deep into liquid staking, and we realized that it doesn't just solve the problem of additional yields, but it really solves a lot more than just that. So obviously, capital efficiency being key. When you stake your Atom, you lock it up for a long period of time. You want to unstake it. It takes 21 days. Not ideal. Not the best user experience. Market starts crashing. You can't get out of your position. You're panicking. Too many things. You're not generating additional yield on top of your staked assets. So that was kind of the very basic thought process behind doing liquid staking. But as we started building, what we realized that liquid staking goes much beyond this, and so we shipped the first product, which was SDK Atom on Ethereum. So we kind of went the other way around, and we tried a bunch of things that may not have worked out, but those definitely gave us a lot more insights than we would have if we just built this out directly. So what we did was we took Atom deposits and issued them directly onto the Ethereum chain, because back then Cosmos did not have IBC, there was no osmosis, there's nothing in the Cosmos ecosystem. So unlike today, where you see a lot of DeFi applications coming into the Cosmos ecosystem, that wasn't the case back then. So we wanted to solve the first issue, which was the issue of liquidity, not getting liquidity on your staked assets. So the ability to move out of the staked position, and that's kind of how we started. But as we started building it out over time, what we realized was that liquid staking is much more than this. By that I mean that there's a good chance that in a peers ecosystem, you can't really have a DeFi ecosystem or a financial ecosystem, and also at the same time have a secure chain if you do not have liquid staking, because it becomes a huge hurdle. Like Val just mentioned, the hurdle to getting people to use DeFi applications is quite high, because I think the Strike team calls it the hurdle rate. As I'm aware, it's 20% right now, which is a lot. Any DeFi application that does not offer more than 20% on your stake on your Atom, you're probably not going to use that. Also because it has additional risk, and it's just not that efficient for you to use a DeFi protocol. You'd rather stake your Atom. But what we realized is that there's a good chance that the future looks like what the future looks like is liquid staking is one of the base layer components for any POS ecosystem to thrive. And there is a future where liquid staked assets do become the base asset of the POS economy, and you don't have to interact with Atom. You don't have to use Atom for trading in the future. Maybe you're just trading with liquid staked Atom, whether it's ST Atom, Q Atom, STK Atom, or Lido's Atom. It could be anything, but that's what we think the future holds, where you are using liquid staked Atoms for every single thing. You wanna, like similar to what Binance did with BUSD, for example, where you deposit in USDC or you deposit in any other stable coin. They just convert it to BUSD. Obviously, things are different there because you can instantly get the underlying. You can move back to USDC from BUSD instantly, but trading happens in BUSD, for example. So we see a future where users could just deposit. Let's say they don't even have to use a liquid staking protocol to begin with. They don't have to come to any of these liquid staking providers to deposit their assets, get the liquid stake derivative. They could just go to a DEX if that's what they want. It's very much like superfluid staking, except in the background, you are actually the dApp itself is using the liquid staking protocol. So it then becomes more like a protocol to protocol or a kind of integration layer where everything is integrated within DeFi, and users don't have to worry about all these things. So for us, I think it's a lot about capital efficiency and a lot about giving users liquidity. But at the same time, we see a future where for a POS ecosystem to thrive, it has to have a very solid liquid staking economy. Yeah.
Thanks, Mikhil. Vish, I'm gonna move on to you and your vision, guys, with Quicksilver. What liquid staking for you, and what's the goal of Quicksilver to achieve? Sorry, Vishal, to leave you for last. But what's the
Somebody
goal
has
you
to
guys
be.
trying to achieve? Yeah, somebody has to be last. It could be me every time, but I promise I will be. But okay, Vish, sorry, go on.
So I guess like Val and Mikhil covered a lot of it, and like echoing some of that sentiment, like when we started Quicksilver, like we really believed in this vision that liquid stake tokens would be a base asset in Cosmos. Like unlike other ecosystems, Cosmos didn't have a very mature DeFi ecosystem to begin with. So we thought liquid staking was at the right position. So I guess apart from like the economic argument that was covered pretty well, and just to give some context like to the audience, like the Quicksilver team before we were in course one, and as Mikhil mentioned, we were doing a lot of liquid staking research. We were with the Lido guys when they built Lido for Solana. So like we were aware of liquid staking and like the options that were available, but it wasn't really cutting it in Cosmos, right? Like there was no Cosmosm, there was no way to even deploy a proper liquid staking protocol. Like we really admired P stakes, like workarounds to make something happen when nothing was there. But then all that changed, right? You have IBC, you have osmosis come up, and then you have interchain accounts. Now this, like with interchain accounts, you could really create a solution that was chain agnostic. You could have a liquid staking chain potentially, which then onboards any number of chains, right? Because in Cosmos, we're building for 1,000 chains. So like that's That was the vision. So that was one element to it. And like the second element to like Quicksilver, which makes Quicksilver, is also like how we really wanted. So going off this vision that, hey, if liquid tokens are going to be used as base in like this Cosmos economy, we wanted to do everything that native tokens do. And native Cosmos tokens have like interesting things about them, right? They have like very strong validator communities and dynamics. And also governance was a really big deal, right? Like when we started building in Feb, Cosmos governance was blowing up. So we're like, okay, how do we account for all of this? So really the Quicksilver liquid staking design started, or like when it started as Quicksilver, it started with, okay, how do we represent validators and how do we do governance? And yeah, we started building from there, and yeah, still building.
Nice. Finally, Stride, Vishal. Sorry, man. What
No,
are
no,
you guys?
definitely don't need to apologize. Oh, Scala. It was just funny. My friends often call me Vish, so you said Vish. I was like, oh, it's funny that we're building the same space, have the same name. It's always fun to meet another Vish,
Yeah, two wishes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So everyone else already given really great answers to what liquid staking is, and everyone here has done really fantastic work on kind of bringing liquid staking to the world. And Lido and P-Stake obviously like pioneered the space, and Quicksilver's done some really amazing things as well. And then so just to preface, I think that the future that we see for Stride is kind of one part of this ecosystem where we kind of want there to be a pretty healthy market for liquid staking, want there to be lots of providers. And I think everyone has different kind of goals for what they might want in an LST provider, liquid staking provider. And it's still such a new space that everyone is still, in my mind, kind of innovating and figuring out what the best structure is technologically and socially. And so really excited that everyone here is building really amazing things. And a little bit though on what we kind of see as our niche in liquid staking. So a couple things kind of come to mind and want people to think about when you think about Stride and kind of what we focus on every day. So the first is minimalism, and this is truly like at the heart of everything we do. At Stride, we or seek to be basically a app chain that's only geared around liquid staking and Cosmos. And it's not like this is better or worse than our solutions. There's lots of value in being a DeFi hub, lots of value in kind of vertically integrating your stack. But for us, our niche is we only want to do liquid staking on our chain and do that particularly in Cosmos. Everything when we work every day on Stride and everything we think about pushing features to our chain, we only think about, is it going to help liquid staking? So for example, something like Cosmosm, putting smart contracts on chains, super valuable, lots of unlock you can get for DeFi in general. But for us, it's not relevant to liquid stake on other chains, so we don't introduce it into our chain. And this lets us do a couple things. Let's move pretty fast because we when we deploy new features, we only have to think about how they kind of interact with liquid staking. But if we had, for example, lending protocol on our chain too, and we push out change, you have to think about how all of these features can interact with each other. But for us, because we're just liquid staking, it kind of gives us a narrow focus onto our product. Lets us, we think, make a really, really excellent liquid staking experience for users. On a related note, the second thing we really spend a lot of time on is security. And this kind of comes a little bit from having a limited feature set. So because we really just care about liquid staking, but in our mind, one of the big kind of things that maybe token holders care about is how secure my LST is. So if I have ST Atom or any sort of Atom derivative, like how safe is that? And so we spend a ton of our time basically making our chain as secure as possible. And we really restrict all features in our chain that aren't by liquid staking, basically to reduce the potential surface someone might attack Stride with. And then we also can do some other things on our chain that are a little bit unique, that basically we can monitor variables on our liquid staking. So you have, for example, like how much ST Atom is there, or what the exchange rate is, or like how many people are moving ST Atom around. And if any of these look weird in our chain, we can immediately halt our chain. And that's something that's kind of unique, something we're able to do because we're an app chain that only has one purpose. So our whole chain can revolve around this one feature. Then we have a few other things we've done on security as well. So we're really big into audit. So we're currently on our third audit. We've passed our first two audits. We're doing an audit now with informal systems to audit much more like the IBC code that we're doing. And then our hope is just kind of keep rolling audits in. You can never be too safe. And then the last thing we're really been pushing hard for on security is interchain security. I think it's something that the whole ecosystem at large is pretty excited about. And we're I think on track to be one of the first kind of ICS chains. And our goal here is to use ICS to make Stride have the highest economic security of kind of any zone in Cosmos. So we're working pretty closely with informal systems to make this happen. We're also looking a little bit into like how can we go from ICS to even mesh security, so we can be secured from Osmosis and Atom and even like Evmos and lots of other chains. And so this direction we're moving pretty hard, because I mean, economic security is something that matters a lot to us, and it's pretty scary to have this potential attack vector on your chain. So that's something we're really focusing a lot on at Stride. And the last thing that we're trying to differentiate ourselves on and pushing a lot of effort to is trying to integrate ST tokens, so all the Stride liquid tokens, into Cosmos DeFi. So basically our top goal is to allow our tokens to be as applicable as possible all throughout the DeFi and Cosmos, on whether it's on Osmosis, on Crescent, on Umi, Agoric, any of these. And so part of this is basically it's our thesis that it's a little bit challenging to really build on top of Cosmos DeFi if you don't have really deep liquidity in your ST tokens. So if you have like ST Atom, if someone can only sell 50K of ST Atom before affecting the price, it's not super liquid, and it's going to be hard for someone to really build good DeFi on top of that, because they couldn't ever convert the ST tokens back to their native tokens. And so we put a lot of effort into basically marketing to liquidity providers and talking to them and trying to educate them about Stride, as well as incentivizing our liquidity pools. So if you look right now, I believe we have the 5th most liquid pool in all of Cosmos for ST Atom, and we have pretty deep liquidity there. And I'm working with the Osmosis team to migrate this to a stable swap pretty soon as well. So then that should give us something more like 40x liquidity. So hundreds of millions of dollars of liquidity you can transact with basically on ST Atom. We're hoping to do this for kind of all of our ST pairs. And the idea here is that then it's really easy to go and use that as collateral in DeFi. And on that note, we've been working pretty hard with a lot of the really smart kind of DeFi teams in Cosmos. So like two big things we're excited about here: stablecoins. So we're working pretty hard to make Stride tokens kind of collateral for stablecoins. So imagine you're minting DAI on Ethereum or something, you need to put up collateral for it. So you have like $500 of collateral, you mint $100 of stablecoin, you're kind of safe because your collateral exceeds your stablecoin. So we're working to make ST Atom as collateral. So you can go get your stablecoins, you can get liquidity out of your Atom while maintaining your stake yield. So working with Agoric and Shade and a few other stablecoin providers to make this happen day one. And then the other big thing we're excited about is lending. So we're working pretty hard with teams like Umi and Mars to see if users can borrow against their LSC providers. So you have a staked Atom. How can I go withdraw cash against that? Or how can I go withdraw Atom against that? And so these are all things that we're working pretty hard on. Yeah.
I couldn't click on my unmute button. It was like pam, couldn't click it. So guys, thank you for the descriptions. Now I'm gonna try and summarize a little bit what you guys said for the next question. Vishal already started to touch on that. It was security, which was obviously the next questions, because obviously, when we started to gather the questions we got sent, which was quite a few actually, what we discussed in the chat was one thing, but then we found questions here, but most of them revolve around more or less the same things. And you guys have mentioned, I'm not going to say who mentioned what, but it was like growth, efficiency, capital efficiency, time, base layer, DeFi, security, minimalism. And from here, I know Val Ferov, I'm hoping she might be able to rejoin. The next question is this. It's going to be like a couple of questions pulled together, but I'm sure you guys can choose which thing you want to answer. And the biggest thing that we had was, of course, security. And there is two things in that. And one, it comes about any kind of attack vectors and risks that liquid staking introduces to the ecosystem, and not necessarily maybe just to Cosmos, but to generally, if we're talking like interchain accounts, and then Vishal, again, you already mentioned that. And the second part is, of course, risk mitigation and liquid staking when it comes not in the ecosystem but in Cosmos itself. And the third part is, of course, the depegging. So I know it's a lot. It's not a question exactly as I said, but I want to see the different approaches when it comes to either risk mitigation, security, or depegging. And I'm not going to pick on anyone. I'm going to let you guys, like, whoever wants to go first and take a stab at it, please. I'd be very happy. Vishal, I see you have your mic off. Come on, you're ready, man. Let's do it. Let's do
Sure.
it.
Yeah. We're not talking about. We truly we think about security every day. We just came out like a big meeting on this yesterday to kind of plan it from forward. So it's right in my mind right now. So in our mind, there's basically three kind of things to talk about for security. So basically, we're talking like the kind of attack vectors seem to be one, attack on host chain. So could I mint ST Atom or something and vote in a bad way, or to basically overwhelm the governance of a host zone? That's like one big attack vector people are pretty nervous about. Second is, could I do something on the chain itself, like Stride, to basically take over Stride, and then as a result, get control of all of its staked assets? And the last is there a chance of a Depeg? You saw this with STETH, what's the situation here? So all kind of great questions. I'll talk about the first two first, because they're kind of more conceptual related. Then I think Depeg is maybe a little bit kind of a separate economic thing, but it's still really important to think about. So on the first two, totally a really valid concern on both, can I attack Stride or can I attack the host chain to either overwhelm the governance or overwhelm Stride? And so we have a couple kind of, so we'll start off, you can never be 100% sure your chain is safe. That's kind of the philosophy we take. We're never kind of satisfied with the current security measures we have. We're always looking to do more. And so if anyone has ideas for, oh yeah, I should do this, please reach out to us. We're more than happy to integrate as many security features as we need to. But we've done a few things to basically try to make this as unlikely as possible for someone to be able to do this. So we already kind of talked about minimalism, but basically we want to have a really small attack surface on Stride that makes it so it's hard for someone to actually come and attack, because there's very few variables exposed to users. So for example, we've seen in the last year a couple instances of smart contracts kind of causing issues on chains, like we saw this on Juno, where the chain halted because of malicious smart contract. We're not even allowed to kind of upload the smart contract onto Stride. It's not even exposed as a function. There's only a few things people can track with, like stake, unstake votes. Like there's very few functions. So that's kind of one avenue. You make it so hackers just can't really affect the stake as much. Then we also just have fewer other kind of parts. We don't have DEXs or lending or anything like that. And so that doesn't force us to make security trade-offs between liquid staking and other applications. Then beyond that, I'll just hit these kind of quickly, but we've done a lot of work on testing, and I'm sure everyone here has. Testing is the first kind of approach for hacking mitigate potential hacks. So we do testing on kind of the full Stride code. We also do kind of a pretty unique type of testing that we call like Firehose, which is basically we simulate different chains. We simulate Stride and Osmosis and Juno, Gaia, etc. And then we simulate hundreds to thousands of users on each chain and have them just do random stuff. So be like, I'm going to stake, I'm going to transfer, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And then we go and make sure that even with these hundreds of thousands of transactions across hundreds of thousands of users, that all of the logic adds up. So no one has any funds that are lost or missing, or nothing inadvertently wrong was happening. We've also kind of tested through auditors. We have, we're on a third audit right now. All of our auditors have their own testing pipeline. And then the last thing we've done here, which is pretty unique, there's this type of kind of testing framework called formal verification, where you convert your code into basically like well-defined map, and then you run that map through some checks to make sure, like, hey, is this even theoretically possible? There's some bugs here. The other space I've seen this used is in like airplanes, when they test like how well an airplane can fly, or like air traffic control. And then Informal has built out a really good framework for this, and we're trying to be the first users of this kind of formal verification. So that's like the whole thing on testing here. Another thing we talked about briefly is rate limiting. So our chain has these things that are kind of unique, and definitely has pros and cons, but the idea here is any variable on our chain seems off or weird, we check this every block. And if it ever seems weird, we just halt our chain. So we just stop the chain. And the idea here is a variable should only seem off or weird or funny in case of a bug, which we don't want anything weird to happen because of a bug, or in case of an attack. In either of these cases, we'd rather just our chain stop, and users may not be able to liquid stake for a day or two, but we're sure all the funds are safe. So that's kind of the design decision we're making here. We would rather halt our chain. And then the kind of last thing here is ICS. So we're onboarding onto ICS right now. We're working informal to see how we can do this. But that, I think, is going to help on particularly the attack vector of, could I overwhelm Stride to take control of the host chain assets? Yeah. And then one last thing I'll say here, just really targeted towards this governance type attack. So there's this kind of attack floating around that people I think are worried about of what if I kind of buy ST Atom and I go issue a vote and then immediately sell my ST Atom. So for example, someone puts out a malicious governance vote Atom, like, hey, let me give all the Atom to Vishal. I could go take a flash loan, buy all the Atom, and then go vote for, hey, yeah, I'd love to give all the Atom to Vishal, and then sell my Atom again. That's something we want to happen. And so when we're thinking about Stride governance, we're designing it around ways that really should mirror the host chain governance. You have to lock it up for the same amount of time. You have to kind of follow the same practices the host chain kind of wants, and that we're hoping that's going to mitigate a lot of these kind of attack vectors. And then the last thing. So sorry, I know this is long. We're almost done. You talked about the Depeg. This is something that is pretty. I think are the real possible issues. So we've seen this for other ecosystems where the LSD can Depeg, and it's, either a function of some sort of capital flight or some type of lack of liquidity when people want to get out of their ST token. But I suspect in Cosmos is going to be a little bit less of an issue because all of the Cosmos tokens support unbonding. So on Ethereum, for a long time, you couldn't convert your ST back to ETH. And it's not because of, like the product wasn't good or anything like that. It's just that ETH hadn't finished the merge yet. So the chain only supported one direction. But for Cosmos, all the tokens support both directions. And so if you ever see a Depeg, you should be confident that an arbiter will come back in and kind of arb that token. And we've actually seen this. So Stride's been live for like 8.5 weeks now. And you actually see this. So for the first week of most of our products going live, you see occasional Depegs going down to like 3 or 4 cent Depegs. And afterwards, kind of organic market makers will come in. And anytime someone sells, they actually immediately go and arb it back up. So I think the hurdle rate in Atom is something like 180 bips. So if you ever get a Depeg beyond 1.8%, it's profitable for someone to go buy it, sell it, and then go hedge on the open market. And you actually do see this. Every time it sells off, someone goes in and buys it. Actually, it's definitely under the hurdle rate, which is a little bit confusing, but they're arbing it maybe faster than you might even expect. So we've seen that. And then we also stable swaps kind of come online in Cosmos. That should really accelerate how much liquidity people have. So right now you have over 10 million liquidity in ST Atom. And I'm sure all the other LSU is going to be very liquid as well. And stable swap should really like roughly 40x how much someone could trade around. So hopefully it won't be an issue. And then there's a kind of a whole other conversation of how much leverage should platforms like Umi or Mars kind of allow people to take. And kind of the attitude we're taking is we don't want too much leverage, kind of maybe 50% or something, but something where you have to see a really, really serious defect to cause any issues. And then another ecosystem people kind of push towards like, I want 20x leverage or like 30, 50x leverage. And that mostly we're on the camp of it's probably not going to do that in Cosmos until we're really confident that Peg can hold.
Wish, what about you guys at Quicksilver? What is your take on the whole security? I mean, I kind of agree with Vishal. Maybe Depeg should have been like a separate question and with composability and stuff like that. So maybe if you want to talk a bit, I think, come back to the Depeg composability and collaterals question in the next. So maybe if you want to focus more on security and again what you're thinking about interchain security as well and Cosmos Hub separately and general ecosystem.
Yeah, so like as Vishal mentioned, like I think testing is pretty important, especially before like we ship out liquid staking products, and that's something we've been doing a fair bit for the last month or so, and especially because like we're bringing things like intents into the mix, where a lot of things can happen. It's a much more there's a lot more moving parts when it comes to validator selection. So like I guess something similar to like the Firehose thing Vishal talked about, maybe in a less transaction throughput situation. Like we have like multiple zones set up where we simulate like these intents being set, stake being put up, votes happening, things being sold, things being bought up, and how that affects the overall protocol intent, right? And we're trying to make sure we get every scenario in a multiple times before we're actually comfortable shipping this out. That's one thing. And like with the whole like governance attack thing, like I do agree that some sort of lockup mechanism is needed. And like the challenge here is like each protocol, like you need to build a custom design for each protocol, right? Like if you have assets on Osmosis, it's fairly simple. That Osmosis has a lockup already, right? If a user chooses to bond their GAM tokens. But what if it's in like a Juno contract? What if it's in Crescent? What if it's in Agoric? So there's a lot of thinking to do around that, and I think that's somewhere like where all of us, like liquid staking providers, can learn from each other, because like probably one of us will figure it out on Juno, one of us will figure it out on some other contract on Evmos, for example. So I think that's like a great area of collaboration, and like also like on the governance thing, I think attacks are always like surface area of attack is also a function of the liquidity available for these kind of attacks where you vote and then sell your asset. So you also have to take into consideration like the drag that is involved in buying and selling, and like add it to the economic cost of the attack. So these kind of attacks are possible only when you have like almost 50% of assets purchasable on open market, right? Which which is definitely a scenario to account for, but it's a bit down the line. And I guess with like Quicksilver, we're also initially taking like a nimble approach, so to say. Like we wanna be able to upgrade the chain relatively quickly. So we're like fostering like a very close knit validator community to be able to push out our upgrades at like a very quick speed. Because like the way I envision it is like the first 6 to 8 months after launch, we'd probably be making a lot of changes. We'd be responding to the market, we'd be learning things, new features, tweaking our current features. So we want to be in a situation where we can upgrade the chain very quickly. So yeah, that's one of the things that we're doing. And also, I guess with regards to interchain security, like we'd always been like looking at interchain security very closely. Like even in our white paper, like we have an entire section dedicated to interchain security. But again, like having interchain security compromises some of this nimbleness and being able to upgrade. But then there's also economic security, right? So these things you have to balance. I think for us, like what would be really ideal would be like interchain security V2 or V3, where we can select like subsets of validators. Because also like another issue is, hey, what happens? And I've been talking to like the ICF team a fair bit, like what happens, if on your chain like someone like Binance or Coinbase control like a critical amount of stake. I mean, sure, that's a decentralization concern, but also it's like a bit of a sovereignty issue, right? Like every chain we onboard, we inherently take some of their sovereignty, and so chains which have remained astray from centralized exchange validator influence, right? If you look at community like Juno, like how do we justify that sovereignty takeover when we have a validator set that's relatively centralized? So there's some things like these that I think that we need to work around, and the best solution is to have like a subset, right? Or have a subset of validators. And then also like another issue is like if you have these like large centralized exchange validators, are they going to contribute to chain upgrades? How and that's all a bit up in the air. But in general, like we're really excited about interchain security and mesh security too, and something we're definitely like going to work towards, potentially even contribute to, like when we have the capacity to do so.
I guess just a quick comment. I guess that like selecting validator set on one hand helps to solve stake centralization, and it's kind of has the other side. If I'm choosing the validator set, I'm kind of contributing in a way, right? If I'm saying, okay, only these 20 validators can be, and I'm not having a go. I'm just like saying, like having like I was just to Mikhil, I was gonna say maybe if you can also, for example, touch a little bit, because I see Vishal and Vish both touch stake centralization as a major security issue. Maybe you can expand what you guys in P-stake and persistent, how you guys approach security and stake centralization and mitigating those risks.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think both the wishes did cover a lot of the points. So the only thing that we have to discuss is probably stake centralization. So from our perspective, we've looked at various ways of delegating to validators on behalf of the users. There are quite a lot of challenges today if you want to do that, because assume the ideal situation would be where you allow the user to make the choice of which validator they want to delegate with, and I as a user would just say, okay, I want to delegate with let's say Chorus 1, so I delegate with Chorus 1, and I get my liquid staked derivative back. But obviously, there's a lot of like attack vectors there, and there's no proper solution as of now that I'm aware of. There could be something that somebody here is working on, but the another attack vector could be like I'm running a validator node, which is not I do not have any reputational downside. I'm not a known validator in the community. I just pick up some atoms and I stake with that validator node. I convert it back to the liquid stake token through a pool, and I keep repeating this process all over again. And what this would allow me as a validator node operator to do is to jack up the number of atoms staked on my node over a longer period of time. And in that situation, obviously, I may have some slippage when I'm swapping the liquid stake token to Atom or the native asset itself. But like Vishal said, once stable swaps are in, I don't think that may be a big issue either, right? So how do you mitigate something like that if you want to give users the option to choose their own validators? Right now, I'm not aware of any particular solution, but you could do exciting things like limit the number of assets you could stake across like towards one validator when you take the whole validator set into account. So you can only stake up to X% of the entire stake through your liquid staking protocol or something of that sort. But there's no clear solution there yet. You could obviously allow token holders of the liquid staking provider to decide who those validators would be. Again, this is the approach we've taken for now, where p-stake token holders are able to vote on a proposal, which is already live, by the way. So we've selected 62 validators based on a few parameters, and those are the validators that would be receiving delegations through p-stake in an equal amount. Again, not the best approach, right? Because there could be a situation where a lot of like a community validator, which is something that the Citadel team was bringing up recently, where you as a community validator are reliant on small stakers, and if they prefer liquid staking, all of them just unbond and not even unbond with the liquid staking module. They just use your protocol, and their stake goes away to a lot of these different validators. So it doesn't help the validators as well. So a lot of like dynamics involved there as well. But I think the easiest approach is obviously to over a period of time to figure out a way to allow users to select their validators. But in the short term, I do think there is the easiest way to go to market and solve for bigger problems before this even becomes a problem is to just distribute stake in a proportional manner or in a or in an equal manner. But again, beyond that, if you both Vishal and Vish talked about interchain security. If you take that a step further, and maybe I'm not too aware of this because I haven't had the chance to or the time to look into mesh security in more detail. But if you think about mesh security, for example, now if I am if my chain is secured by another chain, and I could just use the other chain's token to, or somebody could just use the other chain's token to secure my chain and just take their assets. And if, let's say, this chain, the chain, let's take an example, like, on the persistence chain, if the persistence chain is secured by a number of chains, whether it's Osmosis, Juno, and a few other chains, but inflation on persistence is drastically higher than the inflation on these other chains, you could potentially just, keep farming, persistence XPRT through this staking rewards and dump them over a period of time, or have a larger stake on the persistence network. And then, since, let's say, you just say, okay, 10% of Osmo can be used to secure a persistence chain, not more than that. Even in that situation, you do end up in a scenario where your chain is, or persistence is there's a large attack vector there as well. So we haven't yet figured out whether we want to use interchain security or mesh security, obviously, because we want to take a more conservative approach and let things play out and see how it works before we take that decision. Because we've obviously in the past taken some drastic decisions which may not have been the best, like going on Ethereum and doing something like that. So so from a state centralization perspective, I think it's a big issue, but we are not in that situation where it really is that big of an issue. If anything, I think liquid staking protocols would potentially be able to decentralize the Cosmos Hub at this stage. I think given the state of the Cosmos Hub, I think there's a very good chance that we see a lot more decentralization through liquid staking providers choosing validators and not allowing users to do that.
Val, I'm gonna slightly twist the question for you, since you guys obviously launched, and well, not launched. I mean, you are on other protocols, of course, but considering we kind of focused more today on the Cosmos ecosystem and Cosmos Hub, maybe you can, of course, feel free to talk about how you guys, mitigate those risks, or maybe touch more, if you can, on systematic risks, and what you guys generally have already. You've been looking at Stride and Pistake at the Quicksilver working already. Surely you guys are like following what they do at Lido, and you're looking what they're doing good, in your opinion, what maybe you would have done different. Maybe if you can talk like how you not mitigating risks, because you're not launched yet, but what you guys have seen in their work, and what you plan to change or to introduce, maybe any other new mechanics, or if anything, of course, something along those lines.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Is my audio okay, by the way? Because it's a little bit loud. Yes. Okay, great. Yeah, so I think that all of you guys made really, really good points. And actually, our approach is a bit different. And the variables that we're optimizing for are also different. And I think that Vish mentioned it earlier, or yeah, I think it was Vish, who basically said, like there's kind of like a diversity of like approaches in the space, and that's in a way, because it gives the user more choice and agency to say, okay, well, what are my values? What what do I care about, and like what kind of like provider do I want to go for? So one thing, for example, that Vish mentioned was to say, okay, well, for them, they were saying Quicksilver is wants to remain very, very nimble, to be like that. So for us, actually, we haven't launched yet because on purpose, because we are waiting for interchain security. For us, there are different advantages to that. The first of all is like just interchain accounts, and for that to be possible, and to bring more utility to the asset in DeFi, and for users to interact with. But also like the security factor for us, I think it's anything like that. Capital security is something that is that we can't compromise. We actually see it that way. It's like black and white for us. And is as a user, as much as like everyone loves to like, the decentralization narrative, I always like to think like, okay, but like, what would you do? Like if like, for example, you can choose with node operators that can actually operate nodes and have a lot less risk to get slashed. When it comes to your capital, would you rather deposit, with someone that is semi-vetted or not vetted at all? Now there's a big question, like it's a balance, because really it's not in the best interest of the chain to have a few select validators and have really stringent requirements. So the whole question, and like something that we think a lot about, and that honestly we're still even working on other chains, and we haven't like gotten there yet, is how do you balance basically onboarding and like kind of like making sure that the capital is secure for both users, and also like, for the chain, you want good node operators, that can perform well anyway. But also making sure that it remains really, really decentralized, and that there's that we can democratize access essentially to it, so that anyone can become like a node operator. So on Ethereum, the approach that we had was actually a lot more progressive. Like we have kind of like a whitelisting system, and there's a bigger barrier to entry right now on Lido to become a node operator, because withdrawals are not possible. So what Vishal said also about kind of like the arbitrage and like that's something that you can't really do on Ethereum right now, because withdrawals are not possible. So the staked assets are just staked. Now on more flexibility around that, it's a little bit less risky. So the way that Lido is doing it is to say, okay, what if we actually did two kind of different options for the users? So you'll have two different sets of node operators. One of them permissioned. So we say like kind of like opinionated, where we will vet kind of like the node operators that onboard with on-chain and parameters. So on-chain being like uptime, like very kind of like objective, and the off-chain parameters is what to say like, okay, what jurisdiction are you in, like like what kind of servers, like, or what's your infrastructure, all of that, to make sure that it's a very, very diverse and robust set, because you don't want to have that single point of failure in your node operator set. Like, they can't all come from America, all come, all use the same system. So we want to make sure that that's super decentralized and to minimize that risk. And so technically, since one of them will be a little bit more vetted, we anticipate that probably more liquidity will go through them versus the permissionless node operator set. That being said, we think that if the permissionless node operator sets kind of like perform really well, we could then kind of like onboard the permission validator set. But it still would kind of like allow for both options to exist and to still kind of like have that kind of like balance. Of course, now we say that it's something that I think is really cool. Like, I think as like a concept and to try out, but we never know what's gonna happen. And because the other thing also that happens is that like, for example, the other thing that Lido is that Lido, and that's the same across all chains, is that when a staker stakes with the Lido smart contract, it distributes across all node operators. So it's not just a operator, because we realized in the past that often users, as much as like we like to think that they do their due diligence, it's hard to say, like, to take the time to like vet all of the different node operators. So there's a tendency to say, oh, well, most people node operators, so I'm just going to stake all with this node operator, and then that leads to more centralization. So that's also in the design of Lido, to say, well, you know what, we're decentralizing your stake so that not only is your stake less at risk, because like if something happens to that one node operator, you don't want to put that at risk, and then also kind of like for the protocol and the chain. So that's kind of on that side in terms of security. Now, of course, like I think it's, we're still so early that all of us are approaching these things, and like only kind of like time will tell what is the best approach. I think the question of governance is a good one. I think, in the future, definitely like dual governance systems and something like that is something that we're thinking a lot about at Lido. Like, we have some things in the forum regarding that for STETH, and it's something that might be kind of like replicated across, which might be, like relevant to decentralized voting power. But yeah, no, happy to kind of like answer other questions, but that's what the design will be essentially.
I have one more kind of like big topic, and I know we kind of like the time is going quickly, so I'm gonna ask like one more topic about the Depeg and collaterals, and then one more thing before I let you guys run away, if of course you still have time. So the first topic I wanted to touch on, the last topic, not the first one, was what Vishal started to talk about, but as rightly pointed out, I think it was a much too big of a topic. And it's not just Depeg, maybe like collateral and composability, because I think as liquid staking will progress, I mean, all of you have mentioned DeFi and yields, and for a lot of us, liquid staking is an earning tool, right? It's a tool where you're not parking your money, you're making your money work for you. And I think as liquid staking will progress, probably so will the composability of liquid stake assets will change, right? And that means that the pegging risks will probably grow, because, well, if one asset is one risk, 20 assets or whatever basket of how many assets. And again, this is maybe also a question or something to talk about. Should that be done? Should we like make baskets of liquid staking assets, or should the collateral be 500% in this case, or whatever? So if you guys want to touch on that subject, again, whoever wants to go first, please. I'm not going to pick on anyone particularly.
I think I can go.
Please, Mikhil.
Yeah.
Please.
That's actually something that everyone here thinks a lot about, the composability aspect and the efficiency of liquid staked assets. I think the biggest question is, do we, and I know, the way we've all started to do this is by integrating all these liquid stake derivatives as collateral asset on a borrowing lending platform or any stablecoin issuance platform. But maybe what could happen in the future, and maybe the right approach would not even be to have that as the to take that approach. The better approach might be, and I may be wrong here, would be to like not even ask the user to use their liquid staked asset as collateral, but just the native asset, and that itself is automatically liquid staked in the background. Obviously, that would require, if you're moving across chains, that would require interchain accounts and a bunch of other complex tech. You would need ICQ, and you need to always be able to redeem that asset, because if I as a user deposit Atom as collateral, if when I withdraw it I want it to be Atom, I don't want it to be like XPRT or Juno or Osmo, right? So similarly, when I deposit liquid staked Atom like STK Atom, I would want to withdraw STK Atom. But the moment I as a user deposit Atom, and the borrowing lending protocol is staking it in the background with a liquid staking provider, they cannot offer you Atom immediately. So there's various approaches to this, where you could have something like osmosis, where you have a bonding period, unbonding period to the collateral itself. Obviously not very helpful again. But the other approach, which is something that we've been working on, is more of a redemption pool, where there is a redemption pool which allows these native. So it's not a redemption pool where users can come in and redeem native assets for assets. But to really like supercharge the growth of or the composability of liquid staked assets, you would actually need a redemption pool that is more of a P2P player, where let's say on Osmosis, or in our situation, there's a DEX that will soon be going live on Persistence, which is Dexter, which is again a stable swap DEX, and is mostly focused on yield bearing assets, so liquid staked assets in particular. So something like where and there's another money market like which is also going live. Again, you could do the same thing here as well, where let's say you deposit Atom and XPRT Dexter on Dexter, and the underlying gets converted to STK Atom, STK XPRT, and trading happens in STK Atom, STK XPRT. Like as a depositor or liquidity provider, when you want to withdraw it, you would want to withdraw Atom and XPRT and not STK Atom, STK XPRT. So there is a redemption pool which sits on the sideline, where that redemption pool is, and how do you bootstrap that redemption pool is a whole different problem, because you have the hurdle rate. Why would somebody not liquid stake? Tens of thousands of questions. But I still believe that we'll have a future where Atom is being lent out, and all the Atoms that are lent out, for example, to a borrowing lending protocol, is that is unutilized. It's just sitting there, not generating any returns. Now you could have a future where you can do under collateralized lending, or in fact uncollateralized lending, through a protocol to protocol integration, where you integrate the borrowing lending protocol directly with this redemption pool, and that borrowing lending protocol has the ability to pull back the Atom that it's lent out with this redemption pool. And imagine a world where you have a redemption pool that is connected to all the borrowing lending platforms in the Cosmos ecosystem, and borrowing through this, So that will literally, like, you don't have to worry about using liquid staked assets. It truly becomes the base asset of the PS economy, because you're not worrying about minting it, using it here or there. You're just using DeFi as is. But whatever you're doing, you're also participating in consensus and making sure that the chain is secure because the assets get staked through liquid staking protocols. So I think that would be super exciting to see, and that would lead to a lot more composability. But in terms of the other questions, like having 500% collateralization ratio, I again, maybe I'm too region, but I think that just kills the whole purpose of capital efficiency and what everyone here is gunning for, obviously. Also, because most liquid staked assets follow a similar model. Some may not, like with the exchange rate model, where the value of the asset keeps on increasing. I think you can like safely say that it may lead to a better outcome than using just the native asset. So it in fact is a better form of currency or asset or whatever you want to call it than the native asset. So I think, if anything, collateralization ratio for liquid staked asset should be lower than the native asset. But obviously there are other forms of risks which everyone here has covered. So you can take that into account, but also take the fact that liquid staked assets are a better form of assets than native assets in terms of capital efficiency, at least. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Maybe whoever wants to answer next to take on that, maybe if you guys want to touch on maybe insurance, for example, because in I know it's not a typical thing, especially when it comes to liquid staking. In fact, I don't think I've heard it being discussed, but I've definitely I think we all have definitely seen Ethereum grow to the point of protocols or apps or whatever is the correct word here, proposing insurance for DeFi. Would that be also the case for liquid staking baskets in the future? Where, because what if somebody decides to use UST as part of those? I'm talking about old Terra, right? And you know, then we have like, ooh, we have caramba, you know, like we're gonna have a big problem. And of course, again, this is just like crazy talk right now, but would love to hear your opinions, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
Val, you want to go first?
no, go ahead, Vish. Go ahead, Vish.
No, yeah, I was just bringing this up because I ran the numbers on like what like a insured liquid staking protocol could look like. I think about a year ago, and it's actually like very much doable. I think it's a direction that most protocols can move in when it's required. Like if you take like a small percentage of staking rewards and like send it to like an insurance pool, uh, it's theoretically possible. Also because slashing in Cosmos itself, the parameters are very low as of now, and I think it's going to remain low for the foreseeable future. It's like 0.05% for downtime and 5% for double signing, and double signing is still pretty rare. So the actual amounts of time this pool is going to be used is relatively small. So it is possible. So that's like on insurance, and I think it will happen at some point of time. Especially when slashing is more like when your staking APR falls, the slashing would be a greater risk in comparison to the reward you'd get. And then things like insurance start making more sense. Because right now your staking reward is your insurance in some sense, right? You're making 18% on Cosmos Hub, more on other chains. So that's already there. With regards to what like Mikhil said, like I actually agree with Mikhil. Like I don't think 500% collateralization ratio is realistic uh, to achieve like the goals of liquid staking. And like also like one of my like a vision of mine, which probably again a bit degen, is also like as time goes on and like level of trust builds up in these liquid assets, I don't see a reason why native assets would be used readily. Like even if you look at like the traditional economy, right? Like you've had these like safer derivatives which are used. Like if you think about like gold derivatives, right? Nobody hauls around gold and takes it to a shop and sell it or buy it, right? You do it through paper money or like paper gold. Actually, even money is something very similar. So it's because we've grown to trust these derivatives, and I think like as the space matures and like maybe give it a couple of years, and I don't think we'd have a Q atom atom liquidity pool or an ST atom atom liquidity pool. We just trade derivative for derivative. And obviously, that doesn't happen overnight. Like all of us liquid staking providers, we have to build enough resilience. We have to build the trust. We have to show the track record essentially that, hey, we can manage this. You don't need to worry about your native asset. And we can give you all the features that your native asset would give you. And if you can achieve that, I think that would be the best form of composability.
Val and Vishal, before you guys answer, I'm gonna throw a little bit more oil into the fire. Um, um, as you talk about, like, regardless of whether it's gonna be Depeg or composability, let me throw like a little bit more oil in there. Like, I'm gonna be devil's advocate for a little bit. I love doing that. It seems that, while we are all discussing this, it seems that with liquid staking protocols and liquid staking products, all the revenue comes from inflation, regardless of what liquid staking. Isn't that a kind of a problem when it comes to revenue? If we are just taking revenue from inflation and we're constantly taking revenue inflation, sooner or later something is going to go wrong, whether it's a deep egg, whether it's, I don't know, whatever. Okay, so deep egg's got nothing to do with inflation, but maybe some, but like whatever, right? I think like what I'm trying to get at is that, like, shouldn't we have the staking products or protocols, and again, whether I guess I'm more about talking about composability here, and revenue that doesn't just come from inflation but from something more realistic. Sorry, Val, Vishal, and of course anybody else who wants to take on that too.
Yeah, I get the question. You're saying, so if you can just, yeah. maybe like or
Yes,
rephrase a
yes,
little
yes,
bit
yes.
like
Sorry, Val. So more or less, it wasn't like a question. It was more or less like a kind of a number of points. And I guess like, what does Lido think when it comes to Depeg composability and to collaterals? Do you guys think that collateral of well, first of all, what do you think, or what steps are you planning to take so you're not going to see a Depeg in the future? If it's talking about collateral, do you think we should collateral stake in assets with more collateral than the real cost, whether it should be like in percentage, like I said, 500 for the sake of it, but of course that doesn't really make any sense in this case. And about composability, whether or not you guys think that in the future the baskets are going to be composable of not just one asset but of many, and of course that increases the risks of, for example, depegging, because if we use something like UST as a liquid staking asset and UST collapses, then we kind of have a problem. And I kind of threw the oil as well with the revenue, but I don't know if it should be here. It's just something that came to mind while you were guys answering, that the kind of revenue in liquid staking protocols comes from inflation by the looks of it, and that's not really real revenue, right? So I mean, it is, but it's not. So anyways, Val, sorry, I'm gonna shut up. Sorry, go on.
yeah, no worries. So actually, I think the first thing to do is actually correct a few statements. And I think that the first one being that the revenue comes from inflation, which is not the case. So a lot of staking, in terms of staking, meaning lock up your assets and basically the price will go up kind of thing, which is Lido, and I'm sure not of like Quicksilver or those other protocols. The way that it works essentially is from proof of stake revenue. So yes, like in a way, like yes, there's inflation, but like it depends. That depends on the consensus layer. That doesn't necessarily have to do with the liquid staking protocol itself. And it basically depends on kind of like the reward system mechanism on protocol is just kind of like a business that is built on that. Let's just say. So it's kind of like the cash flow that comes from it. So it's a bit. And then the other piece that I would just say is that as much as kind of like we argued earlier, I heard a bit about kind of like Vishal talk about the Depeg. Depeg is kind of an interesting word because it assumes that it should be pegged, whereas like technically the liquid staking asset is a secondary market in and of itself. So even though we can assume hypothetically that rational humans would behave that way and like arbitrage kind of like both just because it makes it economical, necessarily have to be this way. And we see it in like different liquid staking markets and chains where some that don't have as much liquidity, don't have as much demand, and they might exit their positions for other positions in other liquid staking protocols. So I think that that's something kind of like as a user, you'll always be able to redeem like your ST Atom or whatever it is like for Atom that is staked, but it could trade at another price. Now, of course, that becomes a whole new other question when you talk about like kind of contagion and DeFi and all of us. We want kind of like Vish said, the thesis would be that if it works, if liquid staking works, then as a user, people would automatically secure the chain and only staking atoms, their liquid staking assets in DeFi, which would be ideal because that would, encourage people to really participate in consensus and all of that, and like to secure, but also kind of like benefit from the applications. So that's the ideal scenario. And in that scenario, essentially, as a liquid staking protocol, it's to say the job to be done is kind of now, especially if we want to go from one paradigm to another, is to have those liquid staking assets integrated in all of DeFi. Now, unfortunately, or fortunately, actually, I would say probably, is that we only provide staking assets, and it's a responsibility of the whole ecosystem as a whole to also like kind of like regulate itself and like to understand what kind of smart contracts we're interacting with and what kind of smart contracts we're designing and like what kind of financial system we're designing as a whole. But for the system to work, basically the liquid system, the assets can. So we have very little over like, you know, what a protocol decides to be its collateral ratio. Have opinions on that. We can decide that, you know, we ideally wouldn't want like, you know, assets to be misused in that way, and you know, for absurd collateral, like under collateralized with like nothing, you know, like, or other weirdly designed, I don't want to use the word Ponzi, but maybe like things like that. So ideally we can create a really robust kind of like financial system. I think that that's what we're striving towards. That's what we want to build. That will come with checks and balances, hopefully good governance, hopefully some amount of regulation, whether that is self-regulation, industry regulation, or external regulation. But I think that these will all come. I think it's good for the users, it's good for the protocols, it's good for the infrastructure, it's good for trust, which essentially is at the basis of any financial system. So yeah, I guess that's what I would say. It's not a great answer, but I think to be opinionated in that way. I think it's a permissionless space, and good, bad.
Vishal, what about you? What's Stride's take on all of that, and also on printing and rewards and everything else?
Yeah, absolutely. So we might have a slightly more contrarian take, I think, based on other responses. Not better or worse, but maybe a little bit different. So first on the revenue being inflation, to totally understand where I'm coming from. And also to understand the point you're making, Val, on this is more up to the consensus layer. Like the chain itself determines what it's paying out for proof of stake. But my understanding, I could tell you wrong, is that but most chains today are inflation based. So like 99% of POS revenue is minting new tokens. It's not bad. But like, for example, bonds are also in the same way. Like the U.S. federal like treasury bond, like T-bills, also work in the same mechanism. Like the Fed goes and prints more money and gives it out. It's not intrinsic, I think, that a revenue-based model is always going to fail. You might want some amount of like base inflation, even like a really large, robust economy. But also, I think very plausibly, you can imagine a chain that does not use inflation-based revenue, even though it doesn't really exist today. Everything is so new. So a good example, DYDX is going to launch in Cosmos in a few months. Super plausible in my mind that there's one like legal set of issues that I'm confident some set of lawyers are going to figure this out. But it's technically very possible for DYDX to start streaming their protocol revenue to stakers. So DYDX, I don't know, it does like $1 billion of transaction volume a day. I don't know what the revenue is per day, but I remember it being like a couple $1 million a day. You could easily imagine their market cap is secured by this. Their market cap is something like, I think, a couple $100 million. The revenue is, hundreds of percent of their market cap. It's a very, very healthy staking yield. And there's no reason they have to go dig into like inflation rewards. It's a bit challenging for a lot of DeFi projects right now. So I think a lot of them are pre-revenue, or revenue doesn't really sustainably attract stakers. But I think especially as we start building in this bear market, and we're seeing really massive improvements in technology all throughout crypto, I suspect we're going to see many more like profitable, healthy DeFi products, where then their POS revenue isn't inflation. Then there's like the second avenue question of like, what do you do about leverage? Like how leveraged should my LSEs be, and like how composable should they be? Like, really like this idea from Mikhil on this pool idea. It's super novel, and I do think we're probably going to move towards the system. But I think I'm maybe a bit more bearish in how fast this will happen, although I do think this is the ultimate end future. A good analogy, I think, is maybe not gold, but more like banks. So if you look at like derivatives on money, I think like the 1880s-ish, there was a huge explosion in number of banks in the US. And what happened is each bank had various amount of credit risk and various amount of technological risk. So you imagine you go to like, I don't know, Vishal's bank, and you go to Val's bank, you go to Mikhil's bank, Vish's bank. Everyone has different banks, and they each have different ways that they kind of keep track of how collateralized they are. Different, like maybe if someone really checks from the mortgages, and everyone has different levels of risk. And so each bank dollar wouldn't trade one-to-one. It'd be like my bank dollar might be worth like 50 cents of your bank dollar, and you have this whole system, and the end result is terrible. Like no one enjoys this experience of going to a store and seeing prices in like 50 different types of currency, and you have to convert them all real time. It's just not a pleasant way to live your life. And it was for a long time though how it happened in the US. People mostly we'd have to transact in like hard dollars, or we willing to take this risk of, hey, this bank might go bankrupt in like a year, but whatever, I need to transact. And then what ended up happening is over the course of like kind of like 50, 60 years, maybe it was one act, 1980 or 1920, sorry. But basically, we started standardizing banks. And we started being like, hey, every bank has to follow this exact set of regulation. You have to do all these things. And after you do all those things, then the US government's going to backstop you. So it's going to be like, hey, if this bank goes bankrupt, like people's deposits are going to be secured. And then that makes all the banks the same. Like, I have no idea where you bank, but if you send me $1, I'm going to be like, I don't care what bank it came from. Like, the concept doesn't make sense anymore. To be like, different banks have different dollars. I'd say we're in the super early stages of that right now for liquid staking. Like, if you look at like just hypothetically like X atom versus Y atom, just two random liquid staking derivatives, I think it's a little bit unlikely right now that people think these have identical trust properties or identical security properties. There's different chains have different like security stacks, different chains, different amounts of like market cap, dollar stake, etc. And they're really hard to make them fungible. Like, I can imagine a future where either the ICF or the like atom token holders, etc., vote to push out a standard to be like, hey, you have to do these 20 things in order to be counted as an official LSD. And then we'll balance all the LSDs. And further, the ICF would have to say, I think, hey, if any of these LSDs meet our 20 criteria, and they can be really, really stringent. It can be super severe. It'd be like, you have to have a $10 million bug bounty on it. It'd be really, really strict. But if you meet these, then if you ever get hacked, we will cover your losses. Like, the ICF will print new atom to cover your losses in much the same way banks do today. If a bank goes under, the government backstops us. I suspect we're going to need something similar in order to have really composable underlying assets. Because until we do that, I definitely would not treat the different LSDs as composable. And we're pushing for this to happen, and I hope it will happen much sooner in the next 50 years, hopefully the next year or two. But I think it'd be a big push. But it'd be really cool. I think it'd be a big step, not only for Cosmos, but all of crypto. It'd be one of the first sorts of like institutionalizing derivatives or DeFi in all of crypto. Like, crypto right now is built on all these kind of loose layers of trust. This would be part of like the institutionalizing it, and drives a lot of value back to Atom. Like, we're Atom 2.0 is really looking for, how can I be relevant? How can I really I built this enormous vibrant ecosystem. How can I start getting value back? I think this is a good move for Atom. Like, they should start being the regulators and backstoppers of the whole system. Yeah, and then the last kind of separate point is just on the like, what level of yield should we get, or leverage? Totally agree with Val. It's not really up to us. It's really up to like other people using the protocol, and everything's permissionless. Generally, I would push for Stripe not be too levered. Want this to be like a 10, 20 to 100 to 1,000 year protocol. I don't want it to bust too early. But we're very hoping to get healthy ways to get more yield.
It's astonishing now that you guys are talking about it to think that we are well, I know 11 years or 12 years doesn't sound like much, but it is in blockchain years, and it's astonishing to know that we only came with community pools so far. Like, we still don't. I know Quicksilver actually has some solutions here, right? You have the pool for developers, and I know that I'm not sure Persistence does it. I'm sorry, so I'm not gonna put you on the spotlight. But it's astonishing that we only came up with a community pool so far in 12 years. It's like, why we don't have, from the inflation, putting money in other places to diversify the network is still a question to me. I have tons of questions here. I have like 6 in the chat, some here, some there. I'm going to do it slightly differently, considering they're all more or less the same, and we have like 10 minutes left, even less. I'm going to ask you guys.
I'm actually going to have to hop off.
Okay,
I can't. I have to hop off because I'm already late. But it was really great to talk,
Thank
guys.
You, Val.
I would say, like, maybe if you guys want to share my Twitter handle or whatever, I'm very open to like
Definitely.
receiving kind of questions, and I actually really appreciate it. So if any of you, or like Vish, Vishal, Mikhil, like whatever you guys want to, send me a message. I'll respond. So
Nice. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, guys. Yeah, thanks for hosting. Really appreciate it.
Okay.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, Val. So does anybody else have to jump off? Because if we still have 10 minutes, we can do it. If not, I'll let you guys jump off and we just do like something else. If we have 8 minutes, do we? Yeah. Okay. So instead of like asking the questions that I have, because there is tons of them, and there is no way even with 3 of us that you can answer, I'm gonna do slightly a twist. And considering I've had all of you guys, all the projects, I mean, separately, including Lido, Lido as well, on the podcast, like we know all of you, and we've been speaking to different people for a while. And I know that some of you have expressed the will previously to speak with another liquid staking protocol. So the twist I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ask you, if of course you have the wish, if not, I can do it. To ask a question one another. Maybe one of you has a question like I know Quicksilver has definitely told me before. Sorry, it was Stride that so it's, or Quicksilver. I'm confused. It was one of them that definitely said, "Oh, we would love to see," and ask them a couple of questions. And then it was like another time with Lido as well, I think. And it's like, here's the chance. Maybe you can like, if you can like ask anyone, Vish. Maybe I can start with you if you want. Of course, you don't have to. I'm not gonna push you into that. But if you have, or maybe Vishal or Mikhil, if you have a question for one of the other guys in terms of the differences that liquid staking protocols have, or the opposite, maybe future collaborations that you guys you might come up with, or anything else, please, I would love to encourage you to hear or to hear that.
Yeah, I guess I can. I
Yay!
guess I have something in mind.
Yay!
But I mean, it's not as spicy or controversial as you'd
Damn!
expect.
Damn!
But I guess one area like of collaboration that I think all protocols can really strive towards is uh, figuring out like the governance by proxy system. Because all of us have to do some fundamental things, right? Like all of us have to determine where people's assets are and how they are, and how to count them in governance. Um, and actually a really coordinated way of doing this is maybe breaking it up. And like Quicksilver is already working on like the claims thing for intent signaling, where we let people choose their intent in terms of delegating. So we're building this like claims module where users can come and claim that, hey, I have these assets at this point of time at this epoch here, and then the protocol figures out how to use that to determine intent. And it's something similar that we're going to use for governance. Like now we've done it for osmosis, and we'll, I think, put it on testnet soon. So I think, again, not really a question, but an area of collaboration is okay. I guess the question is like, are you guys looking at things like this, like cross-chain claims? Is that an area that you guys are working on? And if yes, and most likely governance by proxy would need it, uh, I think we should like split up work. See, because all of us are going to integrate into the same protocols, into the same uh, chains at the end of the day. So would it make sense? Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't, to break up some of the work, right? Like some of us have better expertise in certain chains. Some of us maybe have better cosmos teams to look at contracts. So yeah, I guess that's like an open thought that I had.
100%. I think it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I think so, dude. The main question in my mind, I think, for the governance by proxy is it seems very hard to this design if you can't issue ICQs in the past. Because you're really hamstrung on the throughput of ICQ. Like ICQ can handle, I think you can query something like, let's say 100 or 1,000 queries per block. If you're trying to do governance, you have to query tens or hundreds or millions of addresses. But specifically, you want to do these, like you want to make sure no one can lie on these queries, so someone can't double vote. And the limitation to it most seems to be not. I totally wrong here, so please correct me if this is wrong. My impression is the limitation is not like, hey, we know someone needs to go write the code to issue all these ICQs, which is hard, but very doable. But it seems to be like, what's a different ICQ model? You can either issue queries continuously, so you can go backwards in time, which is a little challenging. It requires like change to the late client. Or how can I design a system where I can issue 1 million ICQs at once? My impression is both these are somewhat theoretic. The first one, I think some teams are working on. I think Polymer is making some progress on this. But we'd be super open to collaborate on this. I mean, this is a very hard problem and something that we're like, I mean, this is like a deep research question. It's not just in Cosmos. It's like, if I have blockchain A, any space, how can that blockchain get the state of a different blockchain 1,000 blocks ago or 1,000 years ago? And it's very abstract, very hard problem. Yeah, we're super open to this.
Yeah, I think it's a shame that like Joe isn't here, because like we had this conversation a couple of months ago, and he does have a solution that he's working on, and it's a shame that I probably won't do justice explaining it. So I mean, I think async though, definitely let's talk about that.
Yeah. On that note, go for it.
Yeah. Also, another thing to point out is like the ICQ v2 that Strangelove is working on, where like you can bundle a bunch of queries in like one transaction, send it through, and get a bunch of callbacks. I think that's also like it definitely can't do thousands, not yet. I think so, but it's something that can be used in like very cool ways by all of us.
Totally agree. On that note, we saw you guys had a tweet yesterday. It was super cool, super interesting feature on the intents on different chains. First off, congrats on the feature. I think it's probably like the first time in crypto people have really done something like this, where you're able to query at scale lots of chains. Did you run into the same issue, or is there like a different implementation of when you have chain A talking to chain B, you need to verify ownership? Is there very naive. I have not thought about this problem deeply, but naively, it seems like it's maybe challenging to make sure no one double counts. Like if I have assets here and I move it, how have you guys thought about this?
Yeah, so like one of the things that we do is we query, and again, the query mechanism is done through the front end app, which is quite detailed. Joe's the best person to talk about it.
Yeah.
But we actually like count the previous epoch. So when you claim an asset, you say, hey, I have X asset locked in this osmosis pool 1 epoch ago, and then that's my claim for this epoch. So that sort of prevents people from claiming, moving it somewhere else and claiming, because you've claimed for the past, right? It's a previous epoch. So that's the current thing that we're doing. Again, pretty limited. Like probably doesn't work on chains which don't have such a simple epoch model, or where things are pooled. I guess that's another challenge to solve. Like, what if on osmosis as the GAM tokens where you can figure something out, but what if it's a pool that you can't really figure out asset ownership?
Right.
And this is also like when you like sell your asset, right? You lose intent over the asset that you sell. You lose the weighting, and then the weighting goes to like the LP providers, because it's like an atomic swap, right? There's always a counterparty on the other end.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So sorry, I'm truly I'm still a little bit slow, and I think I'm not that familiar to execute. Is the model like there's an epoch now? I vote my token to notionals validator. The next epoch, my vote carries over. But how does the chain know in this epoch my assets haven't moved? Does it go and issue a query to see if they haven't moved?
So again, I'm probably not the best person to explain this, but there's like an intent set for every account. So every account Quicksilver can set an intent, and so the first epoch there's no intent, right? Because essentially there's no previous epoch to query, and so the next epoch, you query you essentially query all of the assets that exist, and you create like this claim for each account, and based on that, like the intent is adjusted. So yeah.
Yeah,
Again, yeah, I'm probably not like the best guy to explain, but
no, definitely super helpful, and we're also very naive here. So yeah, the only other question on my end, Mikhil, I heard you guys did this software upgrade today, right? To bring kind of all the liquid staking functionality to TP stake, and how'd that go? How's that process? That's super exciting.
Yeah. So we had a chain upgrade today, and thankfully it went much smoother than the last chain upgrade we had, which was like a 30-hour halt of the chain. But yeah, I think so we've been working a lot on automating a lot of stuff and changing our practices on the testing front. So we've been working a lot on like setting up devnets and testnets and testing the whole upgrade in a different manner to what we've done in the past. And I think we've been contributing a lot on the testing front lately towards the Cosmos ecosystem as well. And I think we are leveraging ICQ built by Vish and his team. So we've also been looking at that and trying to add test cases wherever required and working on that. So yeah, that's just super exciting to get this out, because we've been waiting for a very long time now. But for us, I think right after this, governance is the most important thing that we've been looking at as well. And I still haven't been able to wrap my head around the intent model yet. Maybe haven't spent enough time looking into it as well. But I read through the tweet thread as well, and super exciting. But again, just to understand, like, is this the model that you guys wanna do? Do you see this as the long-term solution, or do you think there's something else as well? Because I think there's a lot more to this than just what we are looking at right.
Yeah, so like I've definitely thought about this, and like obviously within Quicksilver we haven't hammered out if this is long, so I'll more give like what my take is on it. And I think like we can sort of mimic like the staking behavior that happens on like regular chains, where like you can have a protocol intent. So like similar to how like I think Stride and P-Stake in the future will incorporate some kind of algorithm to that distribution, right? Uh, so if you do come down on like a very solid algorithm that the protocol could by default delegate to, but you could use intent signaling uh, to essentially undo the protocol's intent, or undo the protocol's uh, validator choices. So essentially, you
Default
have
algorithm. Yeah.
yeah. So essentially, you have like there is some logic at play which is working to delegate, but users can also make that choice to move like into like a hybrid model. I think would be cool, but again, that needs to be looked at.
But you still believe that the default model should be a simplistic one where it is the protocol how to delegate.
Uh, so probably not, because okay, now I think it depends on like what the objective of the protocol is. So like in terms of distribution, there's something I sort of wanted to say earlier. I think it's pretty cool that we have different distribution patterns. So when we heard about like what Lido was doing, because back then when we started building, Lido was uh, the only like liquid staking protocol which is planning to deploy with ICAs and ICQs. So it's like our approach is, okay, let's not do what Lido is doing, because Lido is going with the default distribution model, which they've gone on Solana, which they've gone on Ethereum. So we're like, okay, let's focus on intents first, and then ship that as the Quicksilver default, and then figure out how we can fine tune that, which guess is like the opposite approach that potentially you guys are taking, where you have like a simplistic distribution model, and you figure out how to
Yeah.
and I think that's good. Like one of the things I was going to say earlier, like when we talk about stake centralization, like we always talk about absolute decentralization and centralization, but I also think it's about patterns of distribution. So if you have a greater diversity in like the patterns in which stake is distributed, it's probably more healthier than just having like an absolutely equally distributed stake. And the fact that there are like four of us sitting here today with like different stake distribution strategies, there's two, three more out there. I think that's cool. I think that's a huge win for the ecosystem.
Definitely, I think like the more we communicate as protocols, for sure, some things are born out of that. It's interesting. I was recording earlier on an episode, and for the podcast. I mean, and of course it's not live; it's still a recording. And we were talking a lot about value with Sam from Haifa or ICF, whatever, whichever way you look at Sam Hart. I mean, one of the authors of the white paper. And a lot of the points that were said is that there's a lot of value in communication. That was like one of the, of course, which is kind of obvious, right? But I think it's great. The more, the merrier, of course. Guys, I promised to let you go after an hour and a half. Well, I kind of didn't keep my promise already. I will encourage for this to continue, because there is so many. I mean, like in the future, let's make a second part, of course, and maybe invite some of the other there's a couple of projects, smaller ones, that are still starting out, that reach to us. And to be honest, the amount of questions that I didn't ask is just astonishing. There's like a list, at least like a A4 list with like questions, but I guess it's just not as easy. So guys, I want to thank you very, very, very much for joining, Vishal and Mikhil, and of course Val as well. Thank you very, very much. If you're going to be watching the recording, thank you very much for joining us early on. Guys, if anything you want to add as a closing note, please feel free.
Yeah, I think I would just say that we are launching a P-Stake on persistence, so liquid staking for Atom on 8th November. So feel free to use the application and yeah, share your feedback with us. I think a lot of people have been waiting for this, because we've received so much feedback on the previous product, and obviously it was not that straightforward to use, and yeah, we've kind of taken your feedback and built something that you would potentially like. So let us know what you think.
Mikhil, what is the website of the application? Well, the website.
It would be so it would be cosmos.pstake.finance. It is yet to go live. Right now, it takes you to the previous application, but the URLs will change a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Guys, do you want to add anything as a cloud? Vishal, Vish? Quick.
Yeah, no, I'd actually second that. Like, I definitely recommend going checking out B-Stake. Like, they've been in the game for so long, and like, they've always been building super cool stuff in Cosmos. So since they've announced their launch date, I'd recommend everyone to go check it out.
Vishal?
Thanks, man.
Yeah, absolutely. P-Stake is pioneered liquid staking in Cosmos, and super excited for next week when the liquid stakes my atom. It's an SDK atom. Only other thing I'll plug, if you have any Osmo and want to liquid stake it, so we just launched liquid stake Osmo a couple days ago. So go stake it on app.stride.zone, or if you go to Osmosis, you can see the pool. I think there's a little bit over $1 million liquidity in there. The yield I think is pretty high right now. It's over 100%. So go check it out. Awesome.
Nice. Guys, check out both definitely Strides Osmo and P-Stakes Atom, of course, liquid staking in a few days. And well, Quicksilver, I'm sure there is still a lot more to come. We know that from following them. And Lido, probably later a bit down the year, or maybe hopefully earlier next year. But other than that, thank you very, very much for joining, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.